Okay, again, welcome and thanks for coming. Before we get into today's topic, I want to remind you of our fundamental philosophy. It's never what markets and economies do that makes you successful. It's actually what you do, or sometimes even more importantly, don't do, that makes you successful. Anyone can follow a few simple steps and become both more financially successful and happier. It takes patience and discipline more than it takes smarts. You can be financially successful. And that's what we're here to talk about today. And remember, this is general information and education. Everyone's situation is different, so please don't think of this as specific recommendations. Think about what you learned today, and then before you act, ask some questions and get more specific answers that are specifically suited to you. Most financial decisions involve trade-offs, and all investing involves risk. What we're trying to do today is get you on a solid foundation so when you do start investing in your employer-sponsored retirement plan, your 401k or 403b, you can stick with it. It's always the plan you believe in and stick with that will bring you closer to your own financial success. As always, stay engaged, take some notes, don't nod off. This is important. Write any questions you have down and ask them at the end here if we have time, or if we run out of time, you can always ask via social media channels when it's all over. So, welcome to Taking Control, maximizing your employer-sponsored retirement plan, commonly called your 401k or 403b. If you're joining us in progress, I'm Jonathan Dio, and I'm the founder of Dio Wealth Management, the Happiness Dividend blog, and the Mindful Money Toolbox. And I'm glad to be here today to help you with your 401k or 403b. When we do comprehensive financial planning for our wealth management clients, we speak of retirement as the final trade-off. Boomers are getting closer and closer to retiring, so this is becoming very clear to them. But Gen X and Gen Y still haven't really grasped the simple fact that all of their financial decisions affect their retirements. The type of wardrobe they wear, the car they drive, the house they buy, how often they eat dinner out of the house, how much and how far they travel, how much they support their kids or grandkids' education. Each of these is a decision that spends money now, even if it is for a very worthy reason, instead of saving it for retirement. And once we retire, that's it. It's difficult to get back into the workforce in any meaningful way. And the retirement readiness statistics are staggering. According to the Employee Benefit Research Institute, Americans are facing a $4.5 trillion retirement shortfall. There is a retirement income and shortfall across the income spectrum, meaning even those with large incomes are failing to plan sufficiently for retirement. Americans of all shapes and all sizes are woefully unprepared for retirements that last longer and are more expensive than any previous generation has experienced. My goal here today is a simple one. Lay out the basics of how you use your company's retirement program to its greatest benefit for your future retirement income. We sent an email to you that had a link to the worksheets for today's webinar. If you haven't already done so, you can go to happinessdividend.com, click on the Mindful Money Toolbox, and look for the Real Life series, Maximizing Your 401k Worksheets, because we will be using them today as we go through the presentation. Planning for your retirement today is more important than ever. Unlike your parents and grandparents, we may not be able to rely on Social Security and pension plans to provide us with the financial means necessary to live comfortably throughout retirement. It's a safe bet that retirement in the future will cost more, perhaps significantly more than it does today. Costs for everything from healthcare to housing to utilities are rising. In addition, people are living longer and healthier lives. Your retirement planning must take these facts into consideration. Fortunately, we have more choices than previous generation. Many employers now offer company-sponsored retirement savings plans that provide employees with more investment options, higher contribution limits, and more convenience than ever before. With these choices, however, comes responsibility. It's up to you to determine whether you should contribute to a retirement plan, how much to contribute, and what investment options to choose. During this session, we're going to take a look at why a retirement plan is necessary. We're going to look at how much you need to retire comfortably, which investment tools are most appropriate for your needs, and how a retirement plan, savings plan can help you pursue your goals. As we go through the presentation, think about the following question. How many years away from retirement are you? Is retirement 30 years away? Is it 20, 10? Is it right around the corner? Your time horizon until retirement is an important consideration, but it's just one of the factors we're going to review. Others, including your desired lifestyle, your risk tolerance, your investment portfolio, and your company-sponsored retirement plan are all things to consider in planning for a comfortable retirement. Remembering that the decision you make to save money for your retirement will be part of a trade-off. There will inevitably be something that you are not spending money on in order to save. Everyone's different here. The point is finding the trade-offs that make sense to you. So why do you need to think about retirement now? Well, because as a whole, Americans do not adequately prepare for retirement. Just 18% of today's workers are very confident that they will have enough money to retire in comfort. Just 44% of workers have even tried to figure out how much they're going to need in retirement. Regardless of your age, investing for retirement should be among your top financial priorities. Again, it's the final trade-off. Many experts recommend saving 10% or more of your income for retirement. However, one of the greatest challenges for most people is realizing the need for a retirement investing program. To help you understand why saving for retirement is more important than ever, let's look at the ways things have changed throughout the years. 40, 30, even 20 years ago, many people didn't job hop the way they do today. Many employers offered hefty pensions and medical benefits to help their longtime employees live a financially secure retirement. Medicare and Social Security benefits were even more secure then than they are today. And healthcare costs were not as much of a concern, simply because we didn't live as long. Today, more people tend to change jobs every few years, whether because of corporate downsizing or for their own career advancement. As a consequence, retirement benefits may not be as substantial or as guaranteed as they were for prior generations. The long-term health of Medicare and Social Security is in question, which means people may not be able to rely on these benefits as much as they have in the past. Healthcare and long-term care costs have skyrocketed. The national average cost of a nursing home now exceeds $87,000 a year. Today, people are making a variety of lifestyle choices during retirement, which is making retirement itself more expensive. Maybe they're supporting grown children. Maybe they're caring for their grandchildren. Maybe they're retiring early to volunteer. Maybe they're going back to school or traveling. Whatever they're doing, they're spending more in retirement than previous generations. And then finally, we have to add to this the simple fact that people are living longer, which means that they finance the longer retirements, and each of these lifestyle decisions gets amplified, and the risk of running out increases enormously. 65-year-olds now live an average of 20 more years, according to the Society of Actuaries. This average life expectancy continues to increase. So, how much income will you need? According to the financial experts, you're going to need between 60 and 80% of your final working year's salary that very first year of retirement. So think about how much you hope to make the year before you retire and apply that to the number of years you expect to live after retirement. Much of your decision will depend on the lifestyle you hope to lead. If you plan to travel, you might want to up that amount to, say, 100% of your pre-retirement income. If you plan to scale back expenses a great deal or continue working at least part-time, you may want to go with a lower annual income amount. Also, of absolute critical importance, period, full stop, I cannot say this strongly enough. You have to consider how inflation can affect your income needs during a retirement that could last 30 years or longer. This is the number one issue for the decades-long retirements that we're seeing today. We're going to take a closer look at inflation in a moment. As I said earlier, don't make the mistake of relying on Social Security alone to fund your retirement. Why? Well, because baby boomers have begun retiring and putting a strain on the system's reserves. If left unchanged, which I hope won't be the case, but if it is the case, the trust fund that provides Social Security retirement benefits will be exhausted by the year 2033. But don't despair. Social Security still has an income from all those people who are employed, and after 2033, the estimate is that the FICA taxes from workers at that time will support benefits that will continue at roughly 75% of the current expected amounts. In other words, you actually can plan on receiving most of your Social Security income as expected. And it's not an intractable problem. I'm actually very hopeful that it will be solved long before we get to 2033. Okay, moments ago we mentioned inflation. When considering how much you may need to save for retirement, do not overlook the impact inflation can have over time. While the inflation rate has recently been a modest 2 to 3%, history shows that it's varied considerably throughout the years. As you develop and refine your plan, keep in mind that inflation can potentially spike or dip substantially in the short term. While barely being perceptible from one year to the next, let's look at how inflation can erode the purchasing power of money over time. Consider the following example. Assuming a 4% inflation rate, which is admittedly high right now, $1,000 today would be worth $676 in 10 years, $456 in 20 years, $308 in 30 years, and only $208 in 40 years. Another way to think about this is that a $208 basket of goods will cost $676 in 30 years. That's a 3 times increase over a normal 30-year retirement. And it'll cost $1,000 in 40 years. That's a 5 times increase in price for the exact same basket of goods over a 40-year period. If you retire early and live kind of long, that's the kind of thing you can expect. So if you live a long time in retirement, you'll absolutely need to consider the effects of inflation on your purchasing power. As you can see from this example, the further away you are from retirement and the longer you live in retirement, the more inflation can reduce your purchasing power. So to find out how much you may need to save for retirement, let's take a look at worksheet number 1. Even if you don't have all the information you need, use your best estimate. The first question asks you to estimate how much you'll need each year during retirement. As I stated earlier, experts suggest a general guideline of between 60 and 80% of your final working year's salary each year during retirement, obviously growing with inflation. So think about how much you hope to make that last year before you retire in today's dollars and enter, 60 to 80% of that figure here. Then the next 2 questions on the worksheet ask you to estimate your annual income from Social Security and pensions, again in today's dollars. Social Security currently provides an average annual benefit of about $16,000 for retired workers, and a traditional pension benefits provide a medium annual benefit of about a little bit more than $17,000. Though fewer and fewer people I meet have any defined benefit at all, and mostly these people are limited to academia and medical professions. But regardless of your age or gender, if you plan to take time off from work for an extended period, or if you have taken time off, remember this: the decision can affect your Social Security and pension benefits substantially in retirement. If you find yourself in this situation, err on the conservative side in these estimates on your worksheet. To get a more realistic estimate of your Social Security benefits, you can actually log on to the Social Security Administration's website at ssa.gov and complete the online retirement benefits estimator. If you have a traditional pension plan, your employer benefits administrator should be able to provide an estimate of how much you'll receive. When you get this information, check that you've been credited for the right number of work years and the right salary amounts. Now, finish completing the worksheet to get an idea of how much you may want to accumulate by retirement. Our calculations assume a 4% average inflation rate and a 6% average rate of return during a 25-year retirement. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of time right now to finish this. If you need more time, you can pause us and do this little bit of work before moving on. But right now, I'm going to give you about 30 seconds. So does your accumulation goal seem like a lot? If so, don't panic. This is exactly why we're talking today about your employer plan. Your retirement savings plan at work can play a big role in helping you pursue this goal, if you use it right. Today, millions of Americans can control their financial futures through effective use of their employer-sponsored retirement plans. More than 73 million people are active in their employer plans. This is a big deal. A retirement savings plan allows employees of corporations and private companies to save and invest for their own retirements. You determine how much money you want deducted from your paycheck and invested during each pay period, either as a fixed dollar amount or as a percentage of your paycheck, up to a maximum amount allowed by your employer and the IRS regulations. In 2015, the IRS generally allows employees to contribute a maximum of $18,000. However, some employers may impose lower limits, though I can't for the life of me figure out why they would do this. You also decide how to invest that money, choosing from your plan's different investment options. It is your employer's responsibility to provide good options and some minimal guidance as to the options that you might select. There are two types of plans, traditional and Roth 401k, 403b plans. With traditional plans, the money you contribute to your account is deducted from your pay before income taxes are taken out. Just quick example, if you earn $1,000 each paycheck and you contribute 5% or $50 to your retirement plan, you're taxed on only the remaining $950. You don't owe income taxes on your contributions or their earnings until you withdraw them from the plan. Traditional plans also offer the chance to benefit from the power of tax-deferred compounding. That's your earnings on your earnings on your earnings without taxes in the middle. How much of a difference does this make? We're going to see this in just a second. Employers may also offer a second type of plan. That's the Roth 401k plan. With a Roth plan, your contributions are after tax, but when you take distributions, those distributions are tax-free. Now let's compare the results of the two different $100 monthly investments earning an average of 8% compounded monthly for 30 years. Taxed annually at 25%, this investment would be worth $100,954 at the end of a 30-year period. But if the same investment grew tax-deferred, as in a traditional retirement savings plan, it would be worth $150,030. That's almost 50% more. It's a difference of almost $50,000 just because you didn't pay your taxes up front. Remember, however, that withdrawals from the tax-deferred account will be taxed, but it will likely be at retirement when you could be in a lower tax bracket. If you take early withdrawals, you've got to recognize that you'll be subject probably to an additional 10% penalty. So these are long-term savings and specifically designed for retirement. You're not supposed to pull them out early, and if you do, the feds will impose a 10% penalty on those withdrawals. These examples are hypothetical and they're for illustrative purposes only. They're for the math and don't represent any sort of performance of any actual investments. Investment returns will fluctuate as always and are never guaranteed. Again, we just want to show the difference between paying taxes and deferring taxes. Another benefit of some retirement savings plans is the employer match on part or all of the contributions you make to the plan. If your company offers matching, it's like getting a bonus on top of your salary. To have access to the money your employer contributes to your account and the earnings on those contributions, you must be vested. So vesting means earning the right to the employer contributions over time. Typically, your vested portion of the account rises each year you work for the employer until you own 100% of the account balance. Contributions you make and the earnings on your contributions are always 100% vested. The employer has no interest in those contributions. So now that you have an idea of how much you'll need for retirement and how the retirement savings plan works, you need to review the next step, choosing investments. Now, this requires that you understand the different types of asset classes and your own risk tolerance. Keeping things very simple here, there are three basic asset classes. We call them stocks, bonds, and cash. In a 401k, your cash is often a money market instrument of some kind. Each asset class offers different levels of risk and return possibilities. And even within a single asset class, you'll find choices with both higher risk and higher return potential. So Asset allocation is the process of strategically splitting your money among different asset classes in order to pursue a specific investment goal in the most effective way possible, keeping in mind your risk tolerance and your time horizon. So blending these different asset classes together allows you to fine-tune your retirement portfolio and helps you pursue necessary returns while managing undue risk. This being said, asset allocation can never prevent a loss. I'm going to point to a couple extra resources here. As a subscriber, I hope you've already watched our Risk Does Not Equal Volatility video and our Learn to Love Bear Markets video, which are, I think, critical to placing risk into the context of your overall life. If you don't take market risk, then you risk your money not growing fast enough to keep up with inflation. If you want to battle inflation and the rising cost of living, which we've already talked about, then you need to take some amount of market risk. The issue is how much of your retirement plan you should hold on in stocks, how much in bonds, and how much in cash. Now, I'm going to admit this right up front. No one can predict what will happen in the future. That's crystal ball stuff. But the past is the best guide we have, and this graph is meant to familiarize you with how investments have performed in the past and how most people believe they will perform in the future. Now, perhaps not in actual risk-return numbers, but at least in relation to each other. First, let's look at stocks. For the 30 years ended December 31st, 2014, U.S. stocks outperformed bonds, cash, or blends of the three, returning an annualized average of 11.34% as measured by the S&P 500. Again, for 30 years. Stock investments do carry risks if you equate risk with volatility, which people tend to do, and I completely disagree with, but that's not the point here. You see, in the short term, stock prices are volatile, and in the short term, at the very least, you may even lose money. But their historic performance indicates that stocks provide the greatest potential for long-term growth, although there are no guarantees for this in the future. For a little bit of context of what those losses look like, on average, equities experience a simple correction, which means a decline of at least 10% every single year. And just about every 5 or 6 years, the correction becomes a bear market, which means a decline of at least 20%, averaging about 33%. Again, every 5 or so years. You may experience a quote-unquote loss of 1/3 of your capital. Of course, and this is the critical point here, I put that loss in quotes because the loss is only realized if you panic and sell. The 11.3% average return you see in this graph takes into account all those major declines. In other words, declines happen as a matter of course, but so do recoveries and expansions. Now let's look at bonds. Bonds, as represented by the Barclays Aggregate Index, have produced an annualized return of just under 7.5% over the same 30-year period, but with a lower risk of price fluctuation. Bond prices also fluctuate, but keep in mind that as an asset class, bonds offer a wide range of risk-return characteristics, from very conservative to higher risk. Bonds behave differently than stocks in that they tend to provide regular income payments and to promise to repay your principal investment at maturity. Again, this is not always guaranteed. It bears stating right here, as we give this presentation, that for the last 30 or so years, bonds have been in the sweet spot of declining rates. Remember, there is a mathematical relationship between rates and bond values. As rates go down, the value of bonds that are currently held goes up. So in a falling interest rate environment, which we have had since 1982, bonds will generally do better than they will in a stable or rising interest rate environment, which we probably have today. This is just to say that we probably won't see these great long-term bond returns over the next 30 years. Still, bonds will provide some stability to portfolios and are still recommended for that stability, even if we don't get those returns. Finally, money markets represented by 3-month Treasury bills generally offer the lowest rate of return today, that return approaching zero, but also involve the lowest risk of fluctuations in value. They may be best for short-term goals or for emergency savings, but as a long-term investment, money markets and cash may not be the best choice. Strategically mixing investments from different asset classes can help you lower your risk while striving to maintain a solid return. For example, a mixed portfolio of 60% stocks, 30% bonds, and 10% money markets returned 9.71% at a lower risk level than an all-stock portfolio did for those 30 years ended December 31st, 2014. The next step is understanding your personal tolerance for investment risk and how it can work in conjunction with your time horizon. As I've mentioned, stocks involve the greatest short-term risk of price fluctuations, but over long term, they've historically outperformed other types of investments. But again, past performance can't guarantee future results. There's always the chance that you'll lose money in the stock market and maybe even the bond market. Consider, however, that your time horizon can help you be more or less tolerant towards investment risk. If you plan to retire in 20 years, you might consider investing mostly in stocks. You have time to ride out any short-term fluctuations in pursuit of that long-term growth potential. However, the flip side is if you plan to retire in 5 years, you might lean more towards bonds and money market instruments with a more moderate investment in stocks. Again, remember to review your allocation as your time frame shortens. Also, if you have less money accumulated towards your goal than you should, you may choose to be more aggressive to try to make up that shortfall. But you should always consider how much risk of loss you are actually comfortable with. The worst thing you can do is own a portfolio whose decline is more than you can handle, and then end up panicking and selling out as markets fall. To help you see how you might allocate your investments based on your risk tolerance, fill out worksheet 2. This may take a bit longer than worksheet number 1, so I'm going to give you a solid minute here. Now, retirement savings plan assets can be withdrawn penalty-free when you reach age 59 and a half, or if you separate from service after age 55. You will, however, need to pay taxes on all tax-deferred contributions and earnings. If you take a distribution before this age, 20% will be automatically withheld to put towards your federal income tax obligations. In addition, if you take early distributions, you're very likely to have that 10% early withdrawal penalty. In most cases, you must begin taking required minimum distributions, or commonly called RMDs, by April 1 of the year after you reach age 70 and a half, or retire, whichever is later. After that, you must take distributions annually. If you don't take the required minimum distribution on time, the IRS may assess a penalty of 50% of the amount that should have been withdrawn. The IRS wants you to liquidate your IRA as you approach retirement, between retirement as you approach death. Some of you may be wondering what happens to your retirement savings if you leave your current job. Some companies allow you to leave your savings where they are until you retire, while others require you to move the money somewhere else. Fortunately, the IRS allows you to transfer your retirement savings without penalty to a new employer's retirement plan or to an IRA. This process is known as a rollover, and it happens all the time in our office, and people retire and change jobs. It happens all the time. And there are 2 kinds of rollovers, direct and indirect. A direct rollover occurs, sometimes it's called a trustee-to-trustee transfer. A direct rollover occurs either, 1, when your assets are electronically transferred from one account to another, or 2, you receive a check made out to an institution that's handling your new account, and you just deliver the check to that new institution. In either of these cases, tax deferral continues, and you have no immediate income tax obligation. An indirect rollover occurs, However, when you receive a check made out to you, in that case, 20% of your account assets will be withheld to put towards your federal income tax obligation. Then, within 60 days, you invest an amount equal to your total account assets into the qualified rollover account. This means you must make up the 20% that was withheld out of your own pocket. You can then recover that amount by completing a special form at tax times. If you do not invest the full amount required in the rollover account, the amount that was excluded will be considered a distribution, and you'll be responsible for income tax and maybe even that 10% early withdrawal penalty if you haven't reached the age 59 and a half yet. For the sake of simplicity and to keep your retirement plan intact, we're always going to recommend the direct rollover as the best option. Okay. So today we've talked about the importance of saving for retirement and how a retirement savings plan can help you pursue your financial goals. The next step is up to you. If you haven't already, you might want to create an investment plan that takes into account your investment objectives, time horizon, and risk tolerance. Keep in mind that an early start can make a significant difference come retirement. I highly recommend checking out our 3-part Mindful Money Investing program to help you refine this information and further educate yourself on building a great long-term portfolio in your employer-sponsored retirement program. And consider the chart here. Investor A, who began investing at age 25 and invested for just 10 years, came out ahead of Investor B, who invested for 30 years. Their accounts earned the same rate of return, about 8%, but Investor B contributed 3 times as much and ended up with a smaller balance. The difference here is time. In fact, if we added Investor A and Investor B, you'd get, say, Investor C, who starts investing at age 25, invests the same $100 a month, but does it all the way through age 65. If you did that, you'd end up with, stack the 2 columns together, $335,000 as a nice base of retirement savings. Again, please keep in mind that these examples are hypothetical and are meant to illustrate a point. All else equal, the earlier you start, the better off you'll be. The returns we're modeling are in no way guaranteed. Again, just really quickly, here are the indices we're using as our asset class proxies. For stocks, we're using the S&P 500. For bonds, we're using the Barclays Aggregate Bond Index. And for cash or money market, we're using Barclays 1 to 3 month Treasury Index. So we're just about done here. When we finish, contact your company's retirement plan administrator for information about your retirement savings plan. Invest as much as you can. If you can, invest the maximum you're allowed. In 2015, that'll be $18,000. Remember, you could spend more than a third of your life in retirement. Planning for your financial security is time well spent. I'm here to tell you your future self is going to thank you. For now, I want to thank you for attending this session. I hope it inspires you to take some action and get started today. Also, just remember, again, it's not what markets or economies do that makes you successful. It's what you do that counts. So none of this does anything until you start and set up your 401k or your 403b. Use the worksheets to help you figure out what you're going to need to plan for. Stick to the plan patiently and with discipline, and you will reap the rewards. It is always and everywhere in your power to change the path of your financial future, but only if you start today. Thanks again for attending the second in our real life series, Maximizing Your 401k. Take charge, maximize your 401k. Our Mindful Money Investing 3-part video is available in the Mindful Money Toolbox. When we finish this series, it'll be up there as well. You can become an engaged member of Happiness Dividend today and receive access to all of our content for as long as you're a member. Check out the Mindful Money Toolbox for more details. Just take one last minute here to look at our disclosure. Again, there's no assurance that techniques and strategies discussed are suitable for everybody or will yield positive outcomes. This is for educational purposes. As always, if you think this content's valuable, help me spread the word. Follow us on Twitter, tweet about us, like us on Facebook, post some of our events, become part of the conversation, reach out and tell someone to subscribe. Help someone else educate themselves and start to get ahead. Thanks again for spending so much time with us today, and as always, I wish you way more than luck. Let's open up some questions. Bear with me while I change things back to the video camera, and we will look for questions. To put questions in, again, on the lower left-hand side of your screen, you can enter a question in that chat box and hit send. We're going to get it, and we're going to answer the question here. If we run out of time, we're going to answer those questions that we didn't get to, either on one of our videos that we're going to do, our Mindful Money Minutes, or in our newsletter. Thanks again for being here. Let me switch the camera on.